Okay, so one thing I thought about when we were soliciting questions for this interview was how often these sort of become questions about the realms, which you have so much to tell us, but how seldom I get to hear you talk about writing, which stands to reason because you have this amazing creation that everyone loves, and we all want to delve into its many treasures and secrets and find out like all the juicy tidbits that we don't necessarily get to know otherwise. But I think back, and for years, we would go to Gen Con, and you and I and Susan Morris would have dinner, and we talk about writing. We talk about literature, we talk about craft, and it was wonderful. I hope we get to do that again someday.
Yes.
So I feel like I've gotten to soak all this up, and people are missing out. So, as a sort of direction, so we talk about like gaming and writing, and these are almost like two beasts that share the same forest. Two different beasts that share the same forest, let's say. So what are some ways you've used the techniques of storytelling in writing in your sort of gaming and game development? And then on the flip side, the ways you use the techniques for the games in your writing and your storytelling. How you cross-pollinate.
Oh, sure.
Tell us some stories.
Here we go. No. Okay. When you write a module, a D&D adventure or another role-playing game adventure, I dearly hope that those of you who are actually thinking of like publishing such a thing would playtest it first. Maybe play it at least once, because one of the cross-pollination things I discovered over the years while going to Gen Con, particularly if I was running something multiple rounds rather than a one-shot charity, if you run things 4 or 5 times in one Gen Con, or at 2 or 3 conventions that are not separated from each other by too many months, you realize what things you have to explain at the table. Like, explain better than whatever your prepared text was or whatever. And you identify where players have a hard time visualizing the layout of a room or a cave, and they start asking you questions. And you sort of, I have to say that. And little tricks you use to make the innkeeper not be generic innkeeper number 36, dry rubbing his hands and then wiping himself on the towel, maybe wiping it on your short front, or whatever the innkeeper does. And then he says, or whatever it is he's going to do as you bring him to life. And that gives you little snippets of dialogue, little bits of description of how somebody speaks, what their mannerisms are, that you can add to, as Poobah would say, an otherwise bald and unconvincing narrative, merely a piece of artistic verisimilitude. You can tell I'm gearing up for Erevan.
Excellent.
Anyway, but I mean, that's one cross-pollination. When you're telling a story 2 or 3 times to different audiences, different groups of people, not your own home players, whom you know where their buttons are, you know what their backgrounds are, you know what they care about. Dungeon crawl? Oh, I'm falling asleep. Oh, politics? All right, I'm in, or whatever, But you're talking to an audience you don't know, and you have to convey what's fair. You fairly convey what's going on around them. So you cross-pollinate, you grab stuff like that. The other thing is the obvious cross-pollination in the other direction from the gaming to the writing, is when you're a writer, you decide which direction the story goes in. The characters come out of the inn or tavern, to put it in a D&D sense. Do they turn right or do they turn left? The writer decides. The dungeon master has to be ready for them to open any door on the street like it's Love Actually, and go down there and look inside every house. And of course, what you do is learn 5 or 6 little things. Oh, there's going to be somebody using a chamber pot in the first room of the first house who's going to say, "Do you mind?" and or whatever. You're going to have a few prepared sticks, and you get those ready, and that covers your little faltering pauses. So that's 2 ways of cross-pollinating, and there are lots and lots of others. But I take everything anybody tells you about writing with a grain of salt, a handful of salt, because we're all different. It is an art, not a science. And the one thing I have learned by getting old and white haired like this and literally writing for 55 years or whatever is I've tried everything because I've done enough projects. Oh, could you write to match this cover? Oh, we need you to ghostwrite this thing. We need you to hold the hand of this person who's just fallen to pieces because it's her husband's book, and her husband just died, and she's trying to finish it because they'll live off the proceeds. No pressure, or whatever, you know. And so I've done all sorts of different ways. Let's collaborate this way. Let's collaborate that way. Usually because it's chosen for me. So there is no one right way to do things. There's just what works for this project right now to get it done. Anyway,
Yeah, that makes sense.
that's the quickie answer. I'd love to talk all sorts of writing techniques all night long.
We got some time.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I think
Well, let's go with a different question, and then we can
do it. I have a series. Do you want me to?
Yeah,
to
go for
down
it.
the list.
I mean,
so,
usually I'm the one asking the questions, and I am happy to let Erin step in and do that. So
we should mix it up more. I don't mind doing this occasionally.
sweet.
So I think you mostly hit this, but I mean, acknowledging that nobody has all the answers and that everybody is different. What is a place where you used, because I know that a lot of people who play or who DM also have the writing bug, and often they jump from the role-playing games into wanting to write fiction. And so is there any tip that you have for people who want to move from this? Like, what can you take from gaming to kind of help elevate your storytelling technique? Or, you know, if you're going the other way, if you're wanting to game but you're a really big reader, like, what can you take from like literature and the books you read to kind of inject something new into your games?
Right. I would say from literature, interior monologues. It's hard to do at the table, but for role playing, particularly if you are the dungeon master and portraying a lot of characters at the table in the same session, but also if you're a player and you're doing multiple player characters, you do the what does my character want out of this situation? What are they striving for?
I like that.
What are they trying to get right now? Now, there are some people that you will encounter in daily life who live in the present. The current president of the United States is a perfect example of him. He lives in the moment. And so his goals are going to be far more of the moment. Let's win this argument. Let's get this thing, whatever it is that's right now. And other people play a longer game. The subtle person who maneuvers and manipulates their children from early childhood into the university and profession they want them to have.
Who could we be talking about?
Adjusts halo. No. But I mean, there are some people who do that, and you just want to bear in mind. And there's also the stated public aim. And of course, in the realms, I always had to do this because every single priesthood, every single organized church of a deity has a public aim, which is the ethos of the deity. You know, stroke cats. Don't eat on Fridays, whatever the taboos of the faith are. And they have a secular one. Yeah, we want to corner the market in shoes from here to Baldur's Gate. So we'll be rich beyond the dreams of avarice. I mean, but in a holy way. You know, so there's that. Now, going back in the other direction, one of the things you can learn, which for first-time writers, I think this is something you have to learn, because I have read so many manuscripts that says variations on Sally woke up, Sally got out of bed, Sally walked into the bathroom, Sally picked up her toothpaste, Sally took up her toothbrush, and then she brushed her teeth from right to left and then from left to right. You know, and you're going, I don't. care. Can we cut to the black masked ninja breaking in through her bathroom window and snatching the toothbrush out of her head and running through the house with it just to make things slightly more interesting? Well, if you've done a play session, you know that quite often you will have a time limit if it's at a convention or it's competitive, or you will have a dungeon master who just says, okay, you go back to the tavern and rest. The next morning, because and you actually like dungeon masters like that, because that means, oh good, I got to sleep without getting attacked by ninjas in the middle of the night. This is good. But I mean, you jump to the high bits, and for people who I'm going to do one of the shticks I used to do at Gen Con. For people who are trying to learn to write for the first time, there is a writing technique. And again, take this with a palm full of salt. It might not work for you, which I call the rock video method of writing. Go to YouTube, find a rock video that tells a story, as opposed to one that shows you the guitar player's pelvis 42 times. Something like a Prayer by Madonna. Turn the sound completely off, because you don't care about either the music and the mood it conveys, or the lyrics and the story it conveys. You just want to watch the cinematography. Like a Prayer tells a story in 2 minutes and I think 20 seconds. I don't remember the timing on it. And you just want to pay attention to, what does it show you in camera shots? How long are they on the screen? What do you jump cut to? You can tell a novel, an epic length fantasy novel, the same way by saying, what are my big scenes? Let me write them down on a little recipe card or a cue card. Or if you've already written bits and pieces of them in the computer, just print it out and have 8.5 by 11 printouts from the computer. You need a big flat surface. If you don't have a table, use the floor. If you don't have a floor, or the wall. Or go to the driveway and use the hood of a car.
Ooh.
I've done this. Oh yeah. And if you use the hood of a car in magnets, and it's an old enough car, and it isn't aluminum and stuff, you can actually not worry about breezes. It doesn't blow anything away, because anyway. You lay them all out in the order you think tells an exciting story. And then you take blank sheets of paper or recipe cards or whatever you're using, and you put it in between those scenes. And you draw an arrow leaving from one scene to the other. And then you write down beside the arrow, what's the minimum information I have to tell the reader for that next scene to A, make sense, and B, have an impact, like have some resonance. So we care about the stakes as well as just knowing what the stakes are. Oh, you take the stake through Dracula's chest, the stake. Okay, but you write down what the minimum stuff is. Good, convey it, your story's done. My dread work here is done. No, but I mean, that's the fast way. You can then pad it. I mean, excuse me, you can then embellish to make the word count that your editor, that you signed the contract with the big New York publishing house for, excuse me, to make it out to the right length. But the point is, you have the bones of the story shaped. You're not doing the first time reader's pitfall of, and then this happened, and then this happened, and what will I do with these characters next? And I want there to be a big battle at the end. And you're thinking, yeah, I can tell, because in the middle, there's no pacing in this book. They just meander from place to place. And I have read way too many quest fantasies where I was yelling at the manuscript halfway through, and how did they know to go there? They crossed the continent and unerringly went to the right ruined forgotten temple. How did they know? Because literally the writer had just, and then this happened, and then the next thing happened, and then the next thing happened. There is a famous book of Canadian literature from 4 decades ago by Hugh Garner called Ode Ta, because you couldn't use the word damn in those days. And Ode Ta stands for one damn thing after another. And that was the plot of the novel. And of course, what he was doing was fictionalizing a memoir. So it was one damn thing after another, which was his life. And that's legit. But you don't want your book to sound like one damn thing after another. You want it to sound like you actually have a coherent narrative and it was going somewhere as opposed to just off a cliff. And so if you do the rock video thing, you have laid the bones of your story out. You can then decide to slow down, a la George Railroad Martin, and say, and next to Ser Ringol was Sir Bedivere, and next to Sir Bedivere of White Oak was Lady such and such, and the first course was this, and the second course was that, and the third course, and you're going, come on, they ate dinner, get to the fighting. And then, of course, the pacing at which you do that is you match that to the audience you're going for. And of course, I'm making this sound very cold-blooded and plotting, as if I actually plot as opposed to being a pantser. Because after all these years, I'm always pantsing because it's like, hey, Ed, we need a novel. Okay, so how long? 70,000 words, a short one. Oh, good. We need it tomorrow. Okay. And I'll be emailing you 3 illustrations. These are the 3 we're going to use. So these are the characters you have to have in the book, and you have to have this happening in the book. A castle blowing up and falling down. Yeah, that ought to be good for 2 chapters. How slowly do your castles fall?
Oh goodness.
Nice.
Yeah, so literally we do stuff like that, but and I don't actually cold-bloodedly plan it. But by now, I'm doing it subconsciously.
Yeah.
I'm deciding, is this a YA book? You know, am I graphically showing a torture scene? Are they having sex on top of the body after they've tortured it to death?
Oh no.
Okay.
It doesn't sound like a YA book.
Yeah, you see, there's the thing. You make these decisions as to what you're going to leave out. You see, in the old day, I was spoiled when I started writing novels because very rapidly after my juvenilia novels, I was writing for TSR. And that was the days of fanfold printouts. And I knew that they were just going to tear them at the preparation and pull out the sex scenes anyway. So I could go over the top at any time to entertain the editors. The editrixes I knew were going to receive the manuscript because they were going to stick their diskette in the Mac room at TSR and print it out. And then they were going to carry the printout back to their cube and rip it into 3 or 4 sections so it wouldn't fall on the floor off their lap. And then they were going to read it old style because their poor little eyes were justifiably tired from editing on screen all day. They were not going to read my book on screen. They were going to read it on printout. And they would do this, and they would get to the sex scene or something that said, hey, Karen, this one's for you. And they'd rip it off. And then they'd flip until the row of QQQQQs, and then they'd tear it off again, and then they'd set it down, and they'd stand up on their chair in cubicle land and begin to read a sex scene in the manner of Shakespeare. It was a dark and stormy night. His nipples stiffened in anticipation. And everybody who was editing, who didn't have headphones and a Walkman on, would go, oh God, it's Ed.
Ed Greenwood, that peddler of smut. Yeah.
I love that this immediately, I am delighted for you to meet everybody, but I just suddenly am like, oh, you should meet Rhiannon. And she has an extended rant on people inaccurately depicting nipples in sex scenes.
My startled nipples.
The doorway. Don't do that.
Yeah.
But
yes.
Before we get the town crier out, okay, so, and yeah, keep in mind, we're trying to keep this kosher for our sponsors.
I was being extremely kosher. They're kosher nipples.
This question is the one I want to just remind you. You could take this way out to left field. But if you could run a game based on any novel in the history of fiction, and it would work. So even if it seems like that's absolutely bonkers, you can't run a game that's based on Frankenstein, it will work.
Oh yeah.
What would it be? And like, what would be fun about that?
Any novel in the history of fiction.
Okay. A D&D game.
You know what? It can be whatever. It's a role-playing game, though.
A role-playing game based on... Okay, so the one thing I don't think would work is Waiting for Godot.
It magically works because of this question.
That's just the premise of the question.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to roll patience and absurdity.
Excuse me, teacher, the word problem is not complete. I have a question about it.
Yeah. No, actually, and actually, it would work best with plays, and it would work best with British bedroom farces. Noel Coward's Blythe Spirit, The Importance of Being Earnest, all of those.
I want to play that.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I have in fact done two scenes years and years ago. We had when I went to school, the world was sepia and white, and no. No. When I went to school, we had crazy teachers. I had an English teacher who always wanted to contrast Chaucer, Milton, Shakespeare, and Bob Dylan, and how they were all in the same room and writing the same things. And yeah, exactly. But we would do.
This is so interesting. I knew a woman who wrote a paper about how Dante and Bob Dylan were saying the same thing. She wrote a book that she self-published about Dante and Bob Dylan.
Wow.
There
She
you
had
go.
named her twin sons Dante and Dylan. And I feel like these ladies should be friends. Or enemies. Maybe mortal enemies. Sorry. But I interrupted.
No. But we used to do scenes from Shakespeare's plays. The Tempest was one favorite. Macbeth was another. Excuse me, we're not supposed to say Macbeth. The Scottish
Whatever.
play.
Yang Yang's the only actor, and he's not on, so it doesn't count.
Okay. Well,
Yang Yang's hiding behind his mute, going, "No."
Yeah. Okay. Well, we would do plays in class. No costumes, but we'd do the blocking. Because the teacher would stop us in the middle and say, okay, now, and we would not memorize the lines. We would just hold the copy of the play, and we'd all have the same edition, the class edition. And so we're all on the same page, literally. And we would read the lines, and the teacher would interrupt us and say, now, if you block it this way, you're playing that Cleopatra knows that Antony's doing that. But if you play it that way, that's how you actually learn from Shakespeare, instead of going impenetrable wall of text, or great literature. But I mean, we were learning that way, and we actually did two scenes from Blythe Spirit in which, because we were devils, because we were students of the grade 7 to grade 8 age, and we were into the then brand new D&D, we actually brought all the weird dice and rolled dice for crucial things.
Dice.
Let's see, because Blythe Spirit is a timing. The scenes depend on timing. Somebody bangs out of a bedroom door just after somebody's hidden under the sofa or gone into the kitchen, and they just miss each other. It is the archetypal setup for what Hanna-Barbera did with Bugs Bunny. The banana peel is center stage, dropped, and the audience keeps waiting for somebody to slip on it. And people just miss it, and just miss it. For those of you who are slightly younger than that, Indiana Jones, the very first movie, bad dates, says John Rice Davies, that you're waiting for the catastrophe to happen, and it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen, and the audience forgets about the banana peel, and then you pull it on them. But I mean, we did this with rolling dice, so we actually did bring that in, and the teacher thought we were absolute lunatics. So we had already learned that to get a good mark, you buttered up the teacher. So we told him we'd learned D&D from Bob Dylan, and he was immediately pleased.
I love it.
Perfect.
There you go. I could tell war stories that are A, somewhat clean, B, you haven't heard them before, and C, they came out of left field and you weren't expecting them.
That was wonderful.
All of that's true. Good job, Ed. Well done.